what are some of the things that players need to consider when they're trying to build explosiveness on the pitch?
Explosive power as well. It's not just developed, within ballistic training or whatever within the gym. It's developed out in the pitch in terms of your acceleration, in terms of your resisted acceleration, your sled runs, adequately resting between sprints and stuff like that.
In a slightly different direction, what does your programming look if you're following an explosive phase, or is it something that you just intersperse throughout your training through the year?
So you're actually improving your speed over time, and it's something that I do like to include it year round. And it's about, to be honest, it's about structuring your week in a way that allows you to prioritise that side of things and actually train it when you're fresh, recover and adapt between sessions, so you're actually improving over time. Like, so many people will include all this style of training, but they're not actually fresh when they're doing it, and they're not actually recovering after it to improve or adapt. So
hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the GAA Lean Body Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with somebody who is putting out incredible content online, everything from mindset to nutrition to training, Darragh McGurn. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, Brian, how's things? It's great to be asked onto a podcast like this, to be honest. It's funny, like when I first started out, I suppose learning and training, your page was always the one that I suppose would have spent a lot of time on and probably bombarded you with questions for years when I was 17, 18. Not that you might remember that, but yeah, it's funny that it's came to this now that I'm actually being asked onto the podcast, so it's been a good moment.
It's an amazing full circle thing for sure, Darragh, because when I was reaching out, because I was going through your page, because you're putting out, and I'm going to link it in the description for people below, you have such great content that covers such a wide range. Like, you had a recent post there on 5 things you learned in your first 6 years of playing inter-county GAA with Fermanagh, and there's everything from mindset all the way down to nutrition and training. And now I'm able to send my younger athletes and players to your page so that they can learn directly from you. So I love that it's a full circle moment. But I want to pull it on to the 5 things you learned in your first 6 years of playing inter-county. And there was one thing that jumped out particularly for me, and that's that confidence comes from building evidence. This is a kind of a core concept through a lot of your content. Talk to us a little bit about building confidence. You know this more than anybody, how important that is as a GAA player, but talk to us about building confidence from building evidence.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, I suppose, talk about confidence and how, there's the funny quote about just shouting affirmations in the mirror, but that doesn't really tend to work because we're too smart. As people, we know in our heads if we actually deserve, I suppose, to have confidence or to actually believe in ourselves. So what I found anyway in my own experience playing at the highest level, you can't fake that. You have to have the evidence within your own head that you can actually compete and you can actually do those things. And I suppose starting out, you don't have the evidence, so it comes with your intention. I suppose, what are your intentions? Your intentions are to just get better and put yourself in the environment and just train with better players and actually feel quicker and learn. So that's the only way, to be honest, when it comes to building confidence is just feel, learn, go again, build the evidence in your head that you actually can do it, you can be, I suppose, that you are good enough, and then you just gradually, I suppose, get more confident, I suppose, as time goes on.
Darragh, out of curiosity, with inter-county in particular, because there's a lot of players listening who are at club, but trying to break into your senior team or break into an underage or even senior inter-county team, there's normally a huge confidence gap there. Did you find that for you, and you can use inter-county as probably the example here, did that confidence come gradually over time from training sessions, games, or was it an instantaneous thing? You played one game, one match, one training session, and you're like, okay, I'm actually feel confident in myself for this level, or was that something more gradual, just so that people know expectation-wise how to approach it if they're not feeling super confident at the minute?
I suppose I wouldn't say it was overly gradual. From my memory, in terms of inter-county level, I remember playing my first, I suppose, competitive game, which was in a McKenna Cup game, and I actually ended up doing well, and that was probably the day I was like, right, I know I'm good enough now, I know I can do it. So it was kind of was a singular moment. But then I suppose I remember going into the actual league part of that year, which my first year, and that was when I really got a bit of a shock, and I was like, right, there's a difference here between competing with higher level players and less important games and actually competing at the highest level when the intensity is massively high. So that came gradually. the ability to actually compete in competitive games was something that I just had to build over time and just build the reps. I wasn't overly comfortable in that environment in my first year within the league. I remember like feeling way out of my depth, feeling off it in terms of like I built my level of physicality and conditioning up quite significantly, but in terms of the actual intensity and thinking fast within games, making decisions under pressure, that took the whole of the first year and into the second year before I actually felt confident in that regard. So I suppose it's a funny one, like.
That's really useful, though, I think, for younger players, because you definitely get this on your content on Instagram and social as well, is young players breaking into their senior teams for the first year feeling out of their depth, where as you play more games, as you get more physically stronger, as you get used to playing with those new teammates, potentially your confidence level goes up with it. What were some of the mistakes you made, Darragh, when it came to that transition up? I know on your Instagram you talk about nutrition mistakes you've made or other players have made, training mistakes that you've made or other players make, because there's a lot of overlap with GAA. We tend to make the same mistakes with nutrition, with training, etc. What were some of the biggest ones that come to mind for you?
I suppose there was a few mistakes in terms of the nutrition side of things. One mistake I just think I became overly obsessed with how important nutrition actually was. So yes, it's important to have good whole foods, have a focus of carbohydrates around training, always be consistent with protein, like the small things. But I actually ended up getting to a stage where I had to perfect everything I was doing before a game to feel good and play well, which is complete and utter madness when you think about it. And that led me down to a path of like pre-games. If I didn't get this right or I didn't have the meal exactly 3 hours before the game, I wasn't going to perform well. And that perfectionist mindset, I think, was just one thing that held me back until probably the last year or two, when I really started to realise that it was a perfectionist mindset and it wasn't helping me. So learning the principles and the habits that are required, I suppose, to feel good and perform well is important, but not getting completely hooked up in them and thinking that it's the be all end all to actually perform. And then within my own training, something I probably did too much was just too much gym work and overloading the body, and then not actually prioritising what's important. Like the most important part of your week is actually training. So going into like some of the most important sessions with fatigued legs, sore body, mentally just not there because you put so much into your gym side of things, isn't the smart thing to be doing either, because you're not actually gonna, even though you might be improving in the gym, if you're someone who's struggling to push into a team, if you're not fresh and prime and ready to go for that session, then you're not going to be picked because you're not going to be performing anywhere near your best. So that was probably another key mistake, was minimal effective dosage at times throughout the in-season is more than enough that any GAA player needs. That's
great advice, Darragh. And again, the same mistakes that get made over and over again. I had Gary O'Daly on as well, and Gaz's Gaelic Guide online, and we have that in-running joke that we can bench 130 or 140 and can't kick the ball over the bar, and nobody cares about what you can bench if you're not able to mark your man or you're not able to kick the ball over the bar. With the nutrition, then you mentioned there about that over perfectionism, and I 100% get that. I've been a victim of that myself in the past. What are some of your current pillars of nutrition, some of the best practices or principles that you follow now as opposed to that perfectionist approach? Just out of curiosity, because I know you put up your foods, top inter-county foods and recipes that you like, so again, loads of value on your social, but just hearing kind of from your own words or in your own words, what are your kind of pillars of nutrition in terms of your approach? Do you do it more focus on whole foods or focus on protein, or is there a couple of layers to it?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I suppose, is a focus on whole foods. It's something I've probably more so started to implement over the last year or two, but yeah, as minimal ingredients as possible for about 80% of my foods, 90% maybe, and then I'll always have a bit of leeway when it comes to that extra 10-20%. I don't get caught up in having to constantly be, eating perfect food. So, so carbohydrates would always be a huge focus on days where I'm training heavily. So that could be heavy training sessions in the pitch, or it could be days in the gym where I'm training maybe a full body session or I'm doing plyometrics. So you're still going to need your carbohydrates to be able to perform in those sessions. And then on days where I'm actually having a recovery day or the intensity's low, then I will put a bigger focus on healthy fats, pulling carbs back down, and protein will always be a consistent in all my meals every day of the week, to be honest. So something, I suppose, just to give an example of what that could look like on a training day, if I had a heavy session in the evening, I could have porridge oats in the morning time with some fruit, protein yogurt. Lunch could be, chicken breast, peppers, onions, rice, something like that. Before training, again, it could be something simple like sourdough with honey, banana, and peanut butter, something like that there, something simple. And then obviously on days where I'm recovering and I'm putting a focus on healthy fats, I'd be trying to include more options like your avocado, like maybe fattier meats, coconut oils, nuts, seeds, that kind of thing. Just so I'm keeping a really good balance and variety in across the week. And then there'll always be, I suppose, a good inclusion of fruits and vegetables nearly every day of the week. But I suppose those principles, I suppose, that I follow in terms of dialing up carbohydrates or dialing up fats, they just, I suppose, they're quite simple to follow once you find meals that you actually enjoy eating. Like, my foods wouldn't really change week to week. Day to day, there might be small variations based off what I just talked about, but it's not massively hard to stick to something like that when you are consistent, when you have a routine and you have a plan and you actually do a food shop maybe at the start of the week and you have the foods in the house and you're not rushing or trying to find different things to work at late notice. So I suppose routine, plan and habits are the things that have probably built over the last 4 or 5 years.
It's so interesting with GAA players too, with food, because I would say 80% of ones I've worked with, ones I know, personal experience, and from listening to you there, most of us eat the same foods. It's just we change around the order. Like, we're quite plain eaters. It's typical kind of Irish. It's typical, eat your potatoes, eat your porridge, eat your meats, eat your fish. We don't have to overcomplicate it and overthink it. It's definitely just having that principles approach. Do you add in, and what are your thoughts on supplements then? I had a conversation with Evan Regan. He does the sports nutrition for Mayo, and I liked his line that food first but not food only is his approach, meaning that you use supplements to kind of supplement what you're missing. What are your kind of thoughts in terms of supplements, in terms of any personal preferences? Obviously I've seen protein powders, etc., and lots of different ones on your page, but what's your personal and professional approach, because it might be different when it comes to supplementation for GAA players?
I agree with Evan's statement there. It's definitely a food first, but it's definitely not food only, because there's a lot of, I suppose, there's different vitamins and minerals that we just more than likely can't get enough of in our daily, lives to get the benefits from them. So one, I suppose, supplement I've been using quite a bit recently is magnesium glycinate before sleep. And I've really, really found it's improved my sleep when I've actually upped the dosage levels, and especially after late training sessions. Omega-3, of course we can get enough omega-3, but we just don't. It's as simple as that. Most of us don't. So as an injured athlete too, I try and up that dosage just for, I suppose, for the benefits of reducing inflammation in the body and for cognitive function and stuff. I find it really useful. Vitamin D, obviously, in the winter is a staple. Collagen as well, just especially with having a tendinous sort type injury. Collagen, there's quite a lot of work going on with, I suppose, there's new, I suppose, evidence and stuff coming out around that as well, and its benefits. So I've been trying to keep it consistent in every single day as well with some vitamin C. And then I suppose I have been trying out mushrooms as well, in terms of the medicinal mushrooms from
the functional mushrooms.
Yeah, like cordyceps and lion's mane. Yeah. I have been utilising those recently as well, and I found pretty good benefit in terms of just reducing brain fog, especially with the lion's mane. And then I find the cordyceps gives me a wee boost before sessions too. So that's been cool enough, I suppose, to experiment with.
I think functional mushrooms are going to be the next trend for performance. I had Rashad Evans on my other podcast. He's the former UFC light heavyweight champion, and we were speaking about this in terms of functional mushrooms, how it's exploding in the US, and now in the UK and Ireland we're starting to pick up on that for immune function, for cognitive health for brain function for lion's mane. I've been using lion's mane since 2018 to help with book writing and podcasts and stuff like that, but it has direct correlation for performance on a pitch where you need to be concentrating. So yeah, I think watch that space here for sure, because that's going to pick up over the next few years. With training, something that I actually saved one of your workouts there last week, Darragh, about, it was an explosive one about strength. It had a weighted pull-ups at the end, and then you had different plyometrics and stuff in the beginning. A lot of your focus on training is becoming more explosive on the pitch. I know you get players to get leaner, get faster, but explosiveness is a big thing, and the plyometric workouts you post will help players with that. What are some of the things that players need to consider when they're trying to build explosiveness on the pitch? Or if you want to take it in a slightly different direction, what does your programming look if you're following an explosive phase, or is it something that you just intersperse throughout your training through the year? How does that look like for you?
It's actually something I try and just intersperse throughout the year. I don't really like the thought of athletes completely pulling away from explosive training for small parts of the year and just solely focusing on strength, because again, we're athletes. We want to be, I suppose, training fast and explosive nearly all year round to keep those qualities high and then continue to build them and improve them over time. So obviously, to be explosive, you first need to be strong. If you're not strong, there's a minimal chance you're going to be able to express any power. So we want to be strong, and then we want to be able to produce that force very quickly as well. So you're going to still include, I suppose, your heavy strength training. You could, look at introducing some contrast pairings as well, just to improve rate of force development and stuff like that. You want to keep a good, consistent dose of plyometrics in year round. I suppose you've got your plyometrics for improving more reactivity around the foot and the ankle, and then you've got your plyometrics in, I suppose, your horizontal and your vertical planes, where you're focusing purely on power output, which is a really important aspect of, I suppose, just athletic development. And explosive power as well, it's not just developed, within ballistic training or whatever within the gym. It's developed out in the pitch in terms of your acceleration, in terms of your assisted acceleration, your sled runs, adequately resting between sprints and stuff like that. So you're actually improving your speed over time. And it's something that I do like to include it year round. And it's about structuring your week in a way that allows you to prioritize that side of things and actually train it when you're fresh, recover and adapt between sessions, so you're actually improving over time. Like, so many people will include all this style of training, but they're not actually fresh when they're doing it, and they're not actually recovering after it to improve or adapt. So all of those things are really important if you actually want to go to another level with your explosive power.
Yeah, I love that. Plyometrics are one of those that I think are very misunderstood, because you can do plyometrics for volume and for endurance, and you're getting kind of more of a cardiovascular benefit. But if you're doing it for explosiveness or for speed, your long rest periods, short reps or low reps, and you need to be pretty recovered either in between sessions or even in between sets within the workout. So how you use them is really important. With those types of sessions at the minute, Darragh, what would you be doing gym-wise currently? So obviously, when you're in the thick of league, coming into championship, between, obviously inter-county and club are slightly different in terms of one will be a higher priority depending on the time of the year. But how many gym sessions would you regularly aim for during the year? Or is it a case that you just look for a certain amount of sessions that you get done, i.e. you'll do 20 minutes of plyometrics here, 5 minutes or 10 minutes of strength work over there on another day when you're free? Or do you have structured gym sessions throughout the year? How does it look like for you personally?
I suppose it depends. For me personally, over the last probably 6 months, a lot of my gyms has been focused on rehab because I've had a groin injury, and so I've been working closely one-to-one. But I'll go with the example of, I suppose, if I was fully involved within the county setup, we would have 2 gym sessions where you'd be focused, they must be done on days, I suppose, away from training. So, for example, if we're training Tuesday, Thursday, we might be in the gym Monday and we might be in the gym Wednesday. One could be more focused around strength and robustness throughout the full body. Another might be focused on more, I suppose, power output and explosiveness and rate of force development. Again, sometimes they might be paired up with the training session. For example, it could be Monday, strength, Thursday before training or after training, you might get a session in where you're working on more power development. And then there'll always be an option for an upper body session as well at the weekends. Again, Is it essential that everyone does that? Probably not, but it's something that's just there, I suppose, to stimulate the recovery process and just for a bit of enjoyment as well as an athlete. It can be good to mix things up and actually get in and get a bit of a pump on. So that's probably what it looks like from a gym side of things, I suppose, within an inter-county setup. When you've games coming thick and fast week on week, the body can sometimes be taking a bit of a battering. You might have a game Sunday, you might have a game Saturday. So within that, I suppose, schedule, sometimes it might be reduced down to one session, just to give the body's actual time and, I suppose, to rest and recover and recuperate, because you don't lose your strength levels within 1 week. Sometimes it's just about focusing on good movement, bit of mobility, getting outside, and just, I suppose, trying to bring the body back down and recover as best as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the same argument at high level club as well, that performance is the key, depending on the time of the year. This is why I'm a personal geek for off season, because you have so much flexibility with going heavier or intense plyometrics, whereas in pre-season, a little bit less, but you can still play around with it. In the middle of the season, it's prioritizing for games. Like, that's your priority at all times, and your gym sessions and everything else need to support that. You mentioned there the injury on the groin. I know it's something you've been battling with for a while, but something I'm curious on, and I haven't seen this on your page, but I might have missed it, but I will pick your brain on it. Something that happened to me with injuries, and I've had injuries from years of playing GAA, and then when I'm doing ultra marathons, bodybuilding, things along those lines, I got very geeked out on nutrition. So alternative forms of nutrition. You mentioned omega-3 earlier to reduce inflammation, which is something that I do as well anytime I've got particularly a soft tissue injury. But is there any recovery things you're doing at the minute that you have found have had a disproportionate benefit to either the groin in particular or just your overall recovery between sessions?
Yeah, I've got pretty, I suppose, worked up and put in a lot of focus to what I could possibly do to improve the side of things, especially nutrition. I've went through the path of, zero processed foods, fully whole food options, massively increasing omega-3, massively increasing collagen, all that side of things. But to be honest, the one thing is, or the few things that just help an injury recovery is, one, not pissing off the injury and doing too much and increasing load, actually giving your body time, not getting stressed and overthinking the pain and searching for it and, looking around the body, checking out every single angle to see if you've any pain coming. One thing I got worked up on. And then focusing on getting just good quality sleep. Like, get your 7.5, 8, 9 hours a night, sleep well, and do that consistently for weeks on end. Don't spike your load and stick to a recovery, I suppose, rehab plan that gives you time to actually do the rehab and gives you maybe 48 hours between sessions to actually recover and repair the tissue. Some people can actually, I suppose, halt their progress just by back-to-back days of rehab and not actually giving their tissue time to recover and repair. So that's one thing. And then just listening to the, I suppose, people that are smarter than you, who are actually telling you what to do with this side of things, is important. Focusing on actual movement quality as well is so important, and strengthening the weaknesses that are actually potentially the root cause for your injury. So for me, like, looking at my hip and groin, it's not about looking exactly there and saying, right, there's where the injury is, that what's going on here. It's more so like, how did you end up moving in a way that overloaded that part of the body? Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the most important things for anyone out there, is injuries. And I suppose when it comes to nutrition, those small things I mentioned in terms of omega-3, whole foods, not overthinking it as well, and thinking that them wee tiny 0.1% are going to make a massive difference, because realistically they're not. It's a consistent approach. It's giving it time. It's doing the right rehab. It's resting enough time between rehab, and then sleeping, good quality hours every night.
Oh, you spoke to my soul there, Darragh, when you said don't piss off the injury, because I think anyone that's ever done it, particularly a groin injury, groin or hamstring, you're like moving in every direction to be like, oh no, it still hurts. You're just like, don't piss off the injury. Like, it's like prodding the bear or pissing off your missus when you know she's not in a good form. It's like, just leave it alone. Just let sleeping dogs lay. With the marginal gains there, I'll just add, because I had did a lot of work with TJ Reid for Kilkenny. He's been on the podcast as well. Me and TJ are friends now. We've known each other for years, but he's big on marginal gains, those small things that just add up over time, the increasing omega-3s, the day in between rehab sessions, etc. Like, they're all marginal gains, but they do add up over time. Sleep, I wouldn't say it's a marginal gain. It's definitely one of the foundation pillars, like you mentioned. What do you like as a sleeper generally? Are you a good sleeper, Darragh? Does it depend on the time of the year? Because obviously, even things like sleeping before big games can be difficult. How is your body and mind when it comes to things like that?
Sleep's something I've actually struggled, because this is another thing. I suppose it comes back to the perfectionist mindset, and I would have nearly put way too much focus on having the perfect sleep routine, having the perfect day to sleep well, when realistically you're just putting more stress and more thoughts into your head that are going to create more thinking when you're trying to go to sleep and rest well. But the last probably month, 2 months, I've actually been sleeping the best I've ever slept in my life, and that's just, I suppose, from not overthinking it first and foremost, but also, I suppose, getting a routine that actually suits me, and a routine that I actually enjoy, that actually winds me down. So yeah, at night I tend to get onto the acupuncture mat. That's something that I've seen you doing in the past. I listen to my music in the headphones. I'll hum along the songs, because humming is also something that I've been learning more about in terms of activating the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system. So it's funny, like I'll just lie in on my acupuncture mat, listen to music, and I'll start humming, and I'll be on within 2-3 seconds. And I've been sleeping like an absolute baby recently. And the magnesium before bed, up in that dosage, has really helped things as well. So yeah, I suppose they're probably the pillars for me. Red light is another thing I would try and get on at that time, but again, I don't get worked up and think it has, all these things have to be perfect anymore. It's just, I suppose, about just winding down really, and going to the sleep at the same time every night. And I suppose keeping in a good routine is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. I had Tom Coleman on the other podcast there last week. He did a lot of work with Conor McGregor as a sleep coach, and was saying just that the big pillars, the switching your brain off, anything that allows you to just keep that disconnected, reduce your stimulant intake later in the day, and don't do things that are going to wreck up your sleep. Like, some people find eating before bed helps, others find going to bed a little bit hungry helps. So you have to experiment with kind of the in-betweens. Depends on your training load, your training phase, etc. But as you mentioned there, like the acupuncture mat is great. I have that at home as well, and just listening to music. But the humming is interesting, because I'm doing a lot more meditating now recently. I'm kind of mellowing out in my older age, but humming is something that's came in. My yoga teacher's like, just hum at the back end of the yoga, and I was like, it feels so weird at the start. You're like, the fuck am I doing? But it actually does calm down the vagus nerve. It calms down your central nervous system, so it's really good. Darragh, I just have one final question, but before we get into that, I'm going to link up the Instagram page for people. You have access there where people can reach out for coaching. Is Instagram the best place for people to follow you for content, to reach out for you for coaching, or is there anywhere else you'd like to send them as well?
Yeah, no, at the moment it's all through Instagram. So if you want to apply, you can go through the link in my bio, and you go through there. You can apply for coaching, or you can just drop me a message on Instagram. If you want to, have a chat or book a call, you can do it through there.
Amazing. And for everyone listening, I will link that in the description below, and everywhere the podcast is, whether it's on YouTube, on Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, you'll be able to click straight through to the Instagram, give Darragh a follow if you're not already, and you can click through for coaching if that's something that you think you'll benefit from. Highly recommended. I love what Darragh's putting out there, so go check it out. Darragh, last thing, and you can go in any direction you want here, because we've touched on nutrition, we've touched on training, sleep, supplements. And we've had early days. It's funny, I went back and I mentioned it to close out the loop from the start of the podcast. When I was reaching out to you about coming on, having a chat, I saw our older messages back from like 2018, and I was like, fucking hell. I was like, this listening back. But I'm curious, so 2018 was 6 years ago or so. So if you could go back 6 years, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew then? And you can take this in any direction. It might be mindset, it might be nutrition, training, sleep, could be something completely different. But what's something that you know now that you wish you knew 6 years ago?
That's a really good question. I wish you could go back and ask my younger self a few of these questions, because I suppose back then, 2018, what age? I was 19. At that stage, I had probably 3 years behind me within the gym. I had made quite a lot of progress at that stage. I was just trying to, I suppose, level up again. And one thing I probably just didn't know enough about was like movement efficiency and movement quality, when it comes to developing speed. So I talk about speed. So speed was something that I always wanted to do. Like, I would have been on the stairs doing fast feet. I would have been doing all these ridiculous things, working on the glutes, but moving well and efficiently is something I've learned so much more about now and how important it is. So like running, something I've talked about a lot on my own page, is like running efficiently is more important than running fast. And so that's something that I've just, I suppose, learned a lot about, and something that I would wish I knew back then, because it might have solved me a couple of injuries in the last maybe year or two. And it probably would have me in a much better position athletically. So yeah, that's probably one thing.
Amazing. Darragh, I think that's a beautiful way to round it out. As I mentioned, for everybody that isn't following, go do that off the back of this podcast. And Darragh, keep up the amazing content. I think the holistic approach that you have, from everything from the mindset, the confidence side, all the way down to the nutrition and training, there's so much value. So keep doing what you're doing. And mate, I'm so glad we got to connect on the podcast.
Legend. Thank you, Brian.